Hello, and welcome to Beyond the Firewall, the business bycast, where tech meets business. Get expert insights in real-world business leaders, IT experts, and the latest trends in bite-sized episodes. Stay ahead and explore what's beyond the firewall. And welcome back to Beyond the Firewall, where we bring in amazing speakers about business, technology, and thought leadership. Today, we have an incredible cybersecurity expert talking to us. Robert, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I am from Boston, Massachusetts. So FYI, I've never parked a car in Harvard Yard ever, just so you know.
Love the accent.
And I'm a 30-year security veteran. I'm a best-selling author and architect of what I call the strategic human firewall. Happy to talk about that. And beyond my work on, doing security, I do lots of major media, both US and Canada or internationally. I'm a girl dad. I've got a 17-year-old and a 20-year-old, married 25 years. And I am a flotilla staff officer of the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary. And I am a dad to a Belgian Malinois named Mink.
Wow. That's an impressive portfolio. Love it. Well, congratulations. So, I met you recently and we started talking about cybersecurity and, the human aspect of it and the appreciation of cyber. Tell us a little bit about your journey. You've spent years, talking about it, understanding how criminals think. I wanted to understand what's the biggest vulnerability and how you translate that to the human aspect.
So I, doing what I do for 30 something years professionally, truly, I've been in it for 40 years since I was a teen. And, most people's road to where they got, you can kind of like lay it out and see what's happening there. And it kind of makes sense. Mine is a bit different than most. I didn't start off in cybersecurity. I started off in personal protection as it relates to violence prevention. And for me, that journey truly started when I was 12 years old. I'm 58 now. And so back then, our parents would, open up the door at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning and say, okay, come back before the streetlights come on, which we were always late. And we came back, filthy, often bleeding. And we'd be gone for, 6, 8, 10, 12 hours a day. And we survived it, right?
Yeah.
And my dad gave us a pretty long leash. And I remember like one time, me and my brother, who I was 12, he was 8, we went into downtown Boston via train. And we get off the train, we get up to the surface streets, and there's like 5 kids waiting for anybody. And they basically attacked me, beat me up and took all my money, which was like a few dollar bills and some change. And I was not prepared for that. I go home kind of all beaten and bloodied, and my dad, sees what happens. He's like, oh, yeah, today you were the rabbit and those boys, they were the wolves. And he began to explain to us predators and their prey. I didn't quite understand what he was talking about, but I had an idea, right? And about a year later, I met a girl. She was like my first crush. Mind you, I'm like 13 years old. This is like, 45-ish years ago. And we would be holding hands on the bus on the way home from summer camp. And one day we get off at her bus stop and she's kind of looking at me all solemn. And she says, I think you should know something. And she says, my mother's boyfriend assaulted me. I didn't really understand what she was talking about, but I knew it was bad. And I go home and I ask my Dad, what is rape and what is sex? Because I truly didn't know what she was talking about. I didn't even know what sex was. Like back then, kids didn't know about that stuff. We didn't have porn other than like the random Playboy you'd find in the trash, walking home from school, like legit, right?
Yeah.
And so I understood firsthand, the birds and the bees and sexual assault in the same conversation. And between what had already happened to me and what had happened to her, it had a profound effect in the way I viewed the world from an early age. And so I started to gravitate towards, personal protection as it relates to violence prevention in the physical world, taking karate and teaching all those around me what it is that they need to know to protect themselves, especially young women. And I started to teach real estate agents in the mid 90s personal protection as it relates to violence prevention because realtors, you know, are murdered. It's happened in Canada, it's happened in the US multiple times. And so
Wow.
my small business in the mid 90s was that personal protection to real estate agents. And in 1995, I got my first computer, which was an IBM PS1 Consultant, which is the make and model of a Windows 3.0 OS with a 150 megabyte hard drive. I had to buy a separate card to install so I could get dial up connection to AOL back in the day. And I had the ability to accept credit cards over my computer as a point of sale to charge the real estate agents, for books and videos and such that I would sell to them in my presentations. And after about a month of connecting to AOL and having merchant status, I got hacked. I lost thousands of dollars via credit card fraud. And I did not know that that was a thing, you know? And when I began to investigate it and talk to the bank and the credit card company, they're like, yeah, this has become a big problem for us too. But you still have to pay. You're still responsible for those losses. And as upset as I was because I lost thousands of dollars, I wanted to understand how they did what they did. Like my process has always been, reverse engineering the bad actor in the physical world, predators and thieves, personal security. And now, like, I just got stolen from via AOL, via the internet. And as upset as I was enamored by how they did what they did. And as I reverse engineer that process, I began to understand that, like, this is going to be a big deal. If they could do that to me, they could do this to anybody. I'm just like small potatoes. And I realized back then that this is going to be a big deal. It's one of the easiest crimes you could possibly commit, financially. And it's very hard to get caught, because the bank and the credit card company, they just gave up. They were like, we can't find these people. And as I begin to research it, I started to see it's becoming a major issue. And back then, local municipalities, provinces, in the US, we call them social security numbers. I guess you guys are social insurance numbers, started to post that information online because, like, it was public information to begin with. It wasn't really sensitive back then. And I started to see identity theft started to become a problem. And so now I'm starting to talk about this to the real estate agents because they need to know that this is happening because they handle credit card data in some cases. They handle, in my case, social security numbers. And I started to speak about data security as it revolved around personal information to the agents. And by the late 90s, early 2000s, identity theft and data breaches started to become a big, big deal. And I'd see, like, in the news, national news, 300,000 records compromised at a university in California. It would make national news back in the early 2000s. Today, that's not even a topic of conversation. Today, it makes the news if it's in the tens of millions, you
Yeah.
know? And so for the first like 10, 15 years of my career, I was like the guy that the media would contact to say, hey, here's another data breach. TJX, which was, Marshalls and TJ Maxx and Home Goods and a guy named Albert Gonzalez was responsible for stealing like millions and millions of credit card numbers. He eventually did time. I think he might still be in, I'm not sure. And today what we see now is, compared to back then, is hackers hacked for, fun and fame, but they also hacked for financial gain. And that was like, a hooded kid sitting in his mom's basement. And today it's organized crime. It's like literal Russian, Chinese, Japanese, maybe a little Italian mafia here and there, but they're making tens of billions every single year. They are fully organized. They have the best hardware, the best software, the best talent in the world to hack for financial gain. And many of them are using slave labor, victims of human trafficking, to commit that fraud, which we can talk about. And that's what's really truly changed. It's organized. What hasn't changed in the 30 plus years I've been doing this is the consumer. It's the everyday, guy and gal sitting in the chair. They haven't changed in regards to their appreciation of security. Most of them, and I know this because I get in front of live audiences for a living, most of them are still using the same passcode they did 20 years ago. Most of them don't use a password manager. Most of them avoid two-factor authentication. Most of them do next to nothing when it comes to managing risk because humans don't truly want to think or believe that bad things can happen to them. And they don't see cybersecurity as even being their responsibility, especially at work. They look at it as their CISO's job. And they look at their CISO as he or she is paranoid. They're making me engage in the security awareness training that I don't want to do. And, we're no more advanced in security awareness today than we were decades ago, at least, from the consumer standpoint. The employee might be getting training, but they still don't want to do it and they don't really get it.
Wow. It's so overwhelming what you just unpack there between, the human element of it, the end user, not being something that, anybody wants to deal with. And then at the same time, we've got all these other elements that are on the table here. And I was going to ask, like, why you've identified like personal identity is such a common thing. Well, why hasn't, this been able to be shut down today? And what are the early signs for people today to be able to recognize the fact that their ID or their identity or personal information has been compromised?
Yeah. So there are just so many tools out there that consumers could adopt right now to manage risk. And I'll mention this a bunch of times, and most of your audience already knows this, like basic stuff like password managers and two-factor authentication. And while that just sounds so rudimentary for a sophisticated audience like this one, most of the frontline employees aren't engaging in these one-on-one basics because they just don't quite get it. The first reaction and response when I talk about a password manager in front of a live audience is like they throw their hands up, like kind of almost in defense, like, well, why would I bother with a password manager if they could be hacked?
Yeah,
You
for
know,
sure.
like they use fatalism as like why they wouldn't engage in basic one-on-one security. Well, why bother? It's like, well, if you understood the basics of this, like password managers themselves, while there are vulnerabilities like there are with banks and everybody else, none of them, to my knowledge, have been hacked in such a way where all of the data has been compromised in plain text. It's your best, defense against the 300 billion records that are out there on the dark web. 300 billion over the past 20 years, about 20 billion of them are passwords. So if you're using the same password from 2005, chances are, it's on the dark web. It is in the dark web. And, the likelihood of your email being compromised right now is kind of high because they don't necessarily hack you, they just log in. And the audience is like, well, wait a minute, I didn't know this. Like, I didn't know that like 20 billion of our credentials are on the dark web. And I'm like, yeah. And I show them because I go to Russian hacking forums and show them live all our information just by searching their email, searching passwords. And they're like, whoa, and nobody's ever taken the time to show them that because most security awareness training isn't that. So by engaging those basic one-on-one things, including things like, identity theft protection, which has been
Right.
around for quite some time, and something called a credit freeze, which is available in Canada, I think only in maybe Quebec. They haven't made it like nationwide available, but regardless, like these are tools that are available to at least monitor your social insurance or social security number to keep you apprised to any activity on your credit report, which are like, monitoring tools that at a minimum, like let you know that like something is happening, like I want to know, you know, similarly to like I get my blood work done every single year through my primary care physician because I want to know what's going on with my, cholesterol, white counts, red counts, and so forth. I want to know what's happening with my financial security, my financial life. So I get alerts in a number of different ways to keep me in tune with all that stuff, what's going on behind the scenes. And most of us don't engage in these basic one-on-one, risk management strategies because we as humans fundamentally resist security. Biologically and psychologically, we have been resisting security kind of all of our lives. We don't
Right.
want to truly think it can happen to us. And there's all kinds of reasons for that.
Interesting you say that because, like, my perception to it being in the IT sector for, also 20 some odd years now, the consumer and business owner individual, I feel like their assumption is that the vendor is responsible. They've got the security stuff in place. And then when something happens, it's always like, well, why didn't Microsoft fix it? Or why didn't the security of the product kick in? And why is that not happening? And, then they blame us, or they blame the vendor. And so, like, how is that being addressed today? And how is that misconception being sort of addressed by your services or what you're talking about today?
So I don't know that anybody other than me is addressing that. I don't know that the personal responsibility aspect of security is truly being recognized as where the vulnerabilities truly begin, you know? So I've always felt and believe that because my world began teaching personal protection as it relates to violence and theft prevention, personal security, to me is all security truly is personal. Like at the highest levels of government to your frontline employees, those responsible for protecting our critical infrastructures and those are similar to those protecting our own homes and our own physical being, and for me, I see personal security starting actually in the home, like locking your own doors, installing a home security system. Like it kind of begins there with physical security. And I think like that, and I've observed even at the highest levels of company individuals that are responsible for protecting, their company as a CISO, he or she, I don't know that they are as effective in their own job if they don't have a home security system. And when I say that, I'm not like necessarily putting anybody down, but like if you don't, when I ask people in a live audience, how many of you have a home security system? If I get 15% of the room to raise their hand, that's a lot, which means 85% don't have a home security system. And then I say, okay, well, why don't you? Oh, I live in a safe neighborhood. Okay, well, what does that actually mean? I mean, have you ever read the police blotter? Do you like see what goes on really, truly? And when I asked them, like, well, why don't you have that home security system beyond, like, I live in a safe neighborhood, which safe is an absolute, which means nothing ever has, does, or ever will bad happen in my neighborhood, which, bad things do happen. The answers come back like, oh, we don't have a home security system because we have insurance, as if insurance is going to protect you at 3 a.m. Or they say, well, I don't have a home security system because my husband says if they're going to break in, they're going to break in. What are we going to do? And he's justifying not protecting his family using fatalism, which I have a significant problem with. And then the most common answer that I get is we don't have a home security system because I don't want to live like that, they say. And I go, well, what does that actually mean? Well, I don't want to live in fear. I don't want to have to worry, they say. And then I say, well, okay, so I'm a guy that has 20 plus security cameras. And I do, good sized property between the inside and outside exterior of my property, 20 plus security cameras. And I've been, living like that for decades, right? And I say, well, okay, so I'm a guy that has 20 plus security cameras. What does that say about me? What do you think my outlook is, my disposition, my worldview? Like I wake up every day with 20 plus security cameras. What do you think the audience says that means about me? I must be what?
Paranoid.
Paranoid. Yeah. Which, if you look it up, it is by definition, the medical communities describe that is the unjustified view that you are being persecuted by others. Essentially, it is a mental health dis-ease. And we as a culture, both US and Canada, I think worldwide really, with the exception truly is other than Israel, and there's reasons for that too, we look at security as a bad thing, as like paranoia. Like if you engage in security practices, you must worry, you must live in fear, you must always be looking over your shoulder. I don't want a home security system because I don't want to live like that. I don't want to be paranoid. As if installing the actual hardware is going to make you mentally ill. Think about how ridiculous that is.
Yeah.
And millions and millions and millions, I would say billions of people look at it as that. And so if the CISO doesn't have the home security system because I don't want to live like that, I live in a safe neighborhood, I don't know that they truly believe in security. I don't know that they truly look at security for what it actually is. And what security is to me at its most basic level is putting a seatbelt on. Why? Why do you put the seatbelt on? Because it gives you control over the vehicle. Should something swerve in front of you, should your car, get hit or whatever, it gives you control over the steering wheel, the gas, and the brakes so
Yeah.
that if you get, tossed or potentially tossed, you stay tight, in control of that vehicle. And most of us don't look at it as that. We look at it as like this thing about worry and fear and somebody else's responsibility. When I was 15 years old in my own town, I was jumped by 5 kids, a second multiple attack situation. 5 kids because I got in a fight in the smoking area at high school, and I beat the crap out of this kid. I hit him pretty good. And 4 of his friends and him followed me after school and jumped out of their car and literally beat the shit out of me, like literally, and stomping my head, the whole thing. And there was a cop about 40 feet away from me watching the whole thing go down. He did nothing. He did nothing because he was responsible for managing the security of the traffic in the intersection in which he was responsible for. I was not his first priority. Now, I don't hold that guy responsible for what happened to me in any way, shape, or form. That's not why I'm telling the story. I'm telling the story because it was that day that I learned firsthand that for the rest of my life, anytime I ever heard people say, "Where's a cop when you need one?" That's not how it works. We are ultimately responsible for our own security. And I learned that at a very early age. It was my deal. It was my responsibility that day. To this very day, most people don't look at security as that. And that's truly where the vulnerabilities begin. And in a culture and in a society where I have watched my entire life, even more so today than ever, most people don't take a whole lot of personal responsibility for anything. Anything at all. We blame, 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 blame. Never mind personal security or our health for that matter. It's always somebody else's responsibility. And in
Right.
litigious societies, we see that everywhere. Sue, 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 instead of taking personal responsibility, And that's really where it all begins and ends. And so in my presentations, we talk about the home security and the locking the doors and paranoia and fatalism and how these are all obstacles that prevent us from effectively managing risk because we don't truly believe in or want security in our lives because it revolves around worry and fear and paranoia. And who wants that? But we have to challenge belief systems in order to get people to truly recognize what risk is, putting the seatbelt on, making smarter and better decisions regarding password managers, two-factor authentication, and all that stuff. And once they start to see what risk is, it's not about worry and fear. It's about protecting my bank account, my child's digital footprint, my future. Then they're like,
Right.
that's what security is. I want more of that in my life.
Yeah, I agree with you on that in a sense that people don't like this inconvenience. I remember when we started setting up two-factor authentication with customers and to get access to their systems. And it's like, oh, it's such a hassle. It's such an inconvenience. And I love your analogy in respect to like seatbelts and, other forms of protection and security that today, most kids get into a car, not all, but most, you get into a car today and it's almost like, looking at you strange when you don't put a seatbelt on. Never mind that the car will bing for 20 minutes, reminding you that you're driving a vehicle without a seatbelt,
Right.
but it's true. Like it becomes a creature of habit too. And so to me, it's amazing that psychologically, there should be a little bit more sense of peace of mind, knowing the fact that you've done the bare minimum or you've stepped in the right direction on putting in the two-factor authentication or putting the alarm system in your home. And before you leave, you have it go off, set it so that you're away from the home. And if something were to happen, at least you know that the monitoring service is going to take action if somebody's trying to break into your home. Same thing with security for your business. Like, today there are solutions out there that, there's a SOC team or what I would call a monitoring service that if somebody's actually trying to hack your personal account, or your business account, it's going to say, wait a minute, you're in Toronto or you're in Boston. Why are you trying to log in from North Korea? And it's going to be able to identify that somebody's actually got your credentials and is trying to log into your bank or into your system through North Korea. And they're going to say, no, 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 this is not possible. Let's block this activity. Let's alert you to change the passwords and credentials. And let's make sure this is not going to happen again. Yet people still are, looking in a blind eye on that. So it's interesting the way you position it and make the analogies of how people need to really just step into the right direction. I like that.
Well, the reality is that there is enough security out there. You're providing enough security with all the tools that you deploy to protect any network, any organization in perpetuity, and like keeping the bad guys out. No problem. But it's the humans on the inside that bypass that security in certain circumstances, that don't truly want to or believe in managing risk, that ultimately become that point of failure. I think as much as 75% or more of breaches, it's human vulnerability, human risk. And that is still and always will be an issue until we shift the paradigm. And the paradigm right now is security awareness training, which is a term that I've been using since the mid-90s, has been ruined by corporations that now call phishing simulation training security awareness training.
Yes.
And phishing simulation training is not the true definition of security awareness training. It's become that through functionality creep, but it's not. Security awareness training is teaching the human about security as it relates to their person. And then with that, that's physical violence prevention, theft prevention in both the physical and virtual worlds. That's what security awareness training truly actually is. But that definition has been corrupted, and now it's just phishing simulation training, which we provide once a year during Cybersecurity Awareness Month here in the US, which I think is stupid, and maybe quarterly, and sometimes via micro-learning on a more frequent basis. But it's only really training on one aspect of the security issue, phishing. Recognize this risk, hover your mouse over here, look for this, don't do that, or else. And what does that do? It causes resentment. And the employee is just trying to beat the LMS to get through it so they can get back to work because their paranoid CISO is making them do this.
Mm-hmm.
And that is really not truly as effective as it could or should be, because what we've done is we've put the cart before the horse. And we're engaging in like regulatory and compliance training that really causes a certain level of security aversion. And I don't know that that's going to continue to be effective in a world where it has just decimated any chance that a human has in recognizing risk when, voice cloning and deepfakes are really at this point perfect. And security fatigue really is what I'm seeing right now. And that's caused by that compliance trap, bombarding employees with these complex and personal rules that trigger that security aversion, which is essentially a false sense of security felt by meeting those regulatory requirements while the human behavior remains unchanged and vulnerable, right? Phishing simulation training is necessary, but it's designed to only fix the problem of phishing. Still do it. You got to deploy it, but it fails to address the human where they're at. They're still challenged. And what you want is to get the employee to care about security, and they don't. And what sometimes happens as a result is we engage in, when something bad happens, we blame the victim. We blame the employee that did something wrong.
Right.
And often we fire them. And I understand that, rules and regs, but that employee just doesn't get it. They don't understand. And the CISO is like, why doesn't the employee understand that the email isn't coming from Amazon? Over and over and over again, they click the link from the Amazon email. And it's like, well, because they are on Amazon every day of their lives, and they're not expecting Amazon to screw them over.
Yep.
So when you use that as an example, well, We as human beings, we biologically and psychologically trust by default. That's how we're wired. And I
Hmm.
call this, ultimately, this is called the human blind spot. And it is that human blind spot that ultimately is the fundamental issue that prevents humans from recognizing risk. And as long as we possess the human blind spot, we are all going to be vulnerable. And but there are ways to overcome that. But basically, the human blind spot is the psychological and biological instinct, want, and need to trust. It is that cognitive gap where biological trust overrides suspicion, leaving the door wide open for all kinds of fraud in, social engineering and manipulation. It's easy, actually. And think of it as like the biological default to trust and the psychological shortcuts or the heuristics that criminals use to bypass our human logic and our human emotion. It's that internal conflict that we have when we get that phone call or email or text message that is intentionally trying to deceive us, often using manufactured urgency, which is like a perfect formula. And most humans, most employees have never heard the term the human blind spot, which is something that I've been doing now for 30 years. And until they understand that about themselves, that we are, as humans, an interdependent species, that we are dependent upon each other for our survival. I need you, you need me, man needs woman, woman needs man, fundamentally to procreate. And that procreation is what furthers the species. And we require that we trust each other in order to procreate. Otherwise, it would just be, forcible rape, right? I mean, we got to trust each other. So that trust is what leads us to being scammed, and as long as we don't want to think or believe it's going to happen to us, functioning in denial, which is what we do, because security is about not trusting others. We want to trust others. We don't want to think that people would hurt and harm us. So instead of like recognizing that risk, we're like, whoa, why would they attack me? Why would they steal my identity? Why would they hack my computer? Like, why would they attack my small business? We just choose to function in denial. It can't happen to me, which is, you know, most people. Denial is awesome. Denial is great. It allows us to function in a world that can be, kind of out of control. Like we are literally spinning what 25,000 miles an hour or some crazy number, like just hurtling through the world, like the solar system. Like
Right.
there's a tremendous amount of vulnerability out there, and denial allows us to manage that emotionally.
So you were talking a little bit about, this deepfakes and AI to me is a big conversation these days on almost every conversation for business leaders, obviously on the positive side, but on the negative side, I've heard of, and I have to find the video clip, but apparently some executive was on a Zoom meeting. It wasn't actually the executive. It was like a Hey Gen or some sort of video generated content, and he approved in a webinar or in like a meeting with the team on a purchase order that actually was a fictitious account. And so we're seeing this generation of audio, video, deep fakes that they can make me appear somewhere that's not really me and saying things and doing things that I never did. We're obviously seeing that on social media today where, you're having, Trump, Putin, and Xi Jinping all dancing together in the middle of the street, but you can still kind of identify that that's not real. But it's not going to be long before even that's going to look super realistic. Where do you see this now becoming more of like, am I going to be able to trust anything I'm going to hear or see? And psychologically now, because this is a very psyche game, how is society going to even be able to tackle that from an interpersonal perspective?
Yeah, so I don't know that we ever will be able to trust what we see ever again. And I don't know that by default that we should. By default, I think that we should not trust what we see and what we hear going forward, especially if it involves any level of manufactured urgency, if it involves any transfer of funding in any way, shape, or form. I think that all of that should be followed up with, some form of out of band authentication for one. So AI has truly stripped away the clumsy red flags of traditional fraud, is what it's done. In the past, as we know, criminals relied on blunder force phishing, mass blasting emails riddled with scammer grammar. Today, AI allows for high precision impersonation. It truly does at scale. You know,
Yes.
criminals now use what we call neural puppetry to create the perfect lie. By scraping just seconds of audio or video from social media, they use voice cloning and deep fakes to impersonate a trusted source, like a spouse, a CEO, an attorney. And I would argue at this point, it's really about 100% accuracy. I mean, maybe you might be able to tell, but I don't know. This weaponizes our biological default to trust, making the deception feel 100%. And furthermore, what's worse is AI automates what we call the grooming process, using normalizing dialogue to build rapport and exploit what we call the loneliness loophole. It removes the manual labor of social engineering, allowing a single predator to pilot thousands of digital puppets. And the loneliness loophole is something that like can't be underestimated because do your own research. You'll find that like on average, like throughout the entire planet right now, 25% of all humans wake up lonely. And why does that matter? It matters because they call it the pain and the ache of loneliness, similar to hunger pains or thirst for that matter. Like our body biologically provides us with hunger pains. So we will find and forage, gravitate towards food to eat. Why? To live another day, to procreate. We are programmed to be thirsty when we need fluids so that we will consume fluids to live another day to procreate. So that the pain and the ache of loneliness, we will extinguish it to find a human to procreate. That being said, when 25% of your workforce is lonely, they will do almost anything to extinguish the pain and ache of loneliness. And that generally means today, those wrong number text messages we get. Hey, is this Robert? Hey, are we meeting for lunch tomorrow? And you're like, I'm sorry, who's this? Oh, I'm sorry, this is Gloria. Robert, nice to meet you. And Gloria is beautiful because she just sent her picture to me. And the dialogue begins. And that, you know, puppeteer is now dangling me as the puppet all day, every day, 6, 8, 10, 12 times a day while I'm at work, at my workstation. And before you know it, like Gloria is helping me invest in crypto. And if I'm, you know, working in accounting or accounts payable in the corporation, and I can like move 50 grand, 100 grand, like kind of quickly and put it back within a few days because Gloria is going to multiply my money right away. I'm grabbing that money and I'm sending it to Gloria. And that's happening to the tune of tens of billions of dollars every single year. Why? Because people are vulnerable and fallible and lonely. And that's 25% of your workforce. And until you actually provide them a form of security appreciation training, which basically is like showing them that first and foremost, all security is personal, explaining to them the concept of the human blind spot. The idea is they become what you and I already are, which is what I've been calling for years a strategic human firewall. So I know for a fact that every single time the phone rings, an email comes in, I get a text message, there's a pop-up, I meet somebody for that matter. My BS radar is always on high, but it's by default. Like at this point,
Yeah.
it's like riding a bike. It's balance. Like I've achieved that over the course of a lifetime of paying attention. Situational awareness, looking to the right, looking to the left, knowing what's going on behind me, paying attention to what's in front of me. Every single time I'm in the car, walking down the street, I get a phone call, email, text message. Situational awareness. A strategic human firewall basically is the ultimate defense against deception, is what it is, you know? You and I do this naturally at this point.
Yeah.
We may not have been natural at it, say 30 years ago, but after 30 years of seeing BS, it's like, well, yeah, of course, you know, whatever. That's not the registry of motor vehicles sending me a notification that I'm going to lose my license, and I've got to click this link in via text to pay via Bitcoin. I mean, hello. But a lot of people do, because
Yes.
their radar is they have no strategic human firewall at all, because they've never been told or taught it through any form of phishing simulation training ever, really, truly. And so this strategic human firewall is basically a proactive governance. It's a mindset that transforms us as consumers, citizens, employees from what most of us are passive targets into active detection layers. We're looking for it. Most security awareness training is a monologue. The learner is talked at rather than with. And ultimately, that strategic human firewall is meant to build a human sensor network where that employee is, they're on it. They're paying attention to it because they want to. Because first and foremost, they want to protect themselves. They
Right.
want to protect their own money. They want to protect their own passwords, their child's digital footprint. I put it like this: when you're on the plane and the flight attendant is providing the safety instructions regarding the oxygen mask, what does he or she say to do first when the oxygen mask comes down? What do you do first?
Put it on yourself first,
And why is that?
because you can't help the next person if you can't breathe.
So simple, right? Well, why do we provide? That's the ultimate security and safety. That's the ultimate security and safety. If you can't breathe, you're dead. That's the ultimate security. That is the baseline. If you can't breathe, you're
Mhm.
dead. Well, with security awareness training, you know what we say? You gotta protect us. You know what the employee says? F that. I'm beating this LMS. I'm getting through it.
It's true. It's
It's
very
so
true.
dumb. I've never said protect the corporation first. I've always started off with the assumption that all security is truly personal,
Yeah.
and that CISO does a better job when he or she recognizes that in their own lives first. And when they communicate that to their people, because they live and breathe it in their own lives first and present it from that perspective, then, like every single CISO, every single consumer, every single employee, we all have a mom or a dad or a sister or a child or a spouse that can't stop clicking links, can't stop reacting to pop-ups, can't stop, watching late night TV and buying vitamins they don't need, getting
Right.
scammed one way or the other. We all have these people in our lives. And when you come from it from that perspective, that we all need help to some degree, and we put out all those little security vulnerabilities and fires in our lives, teaching all those around us, including ourselves, like how to manage that risk. Then when the phishing email comes in a corporate environment, it begins to make more sense to us.
Right. So I got a couple questions I got to get to because we're getting a little bit far in the hour here. So business owners today, doesn't matter. I like to say if you're any business, you're a target. Even if you're 10 employees or 200 employees, hackers don't care. But the common theme is, A, I've got limited budget. B, like you mentioned before, is, how am I really gonna address this? It doesn't seem to be a viable tactic outside of throwing more money at it, and I don't see a return on the investment. What would you say today to business owners on how to maximize their investment in a security strategy with what you're saying today?
I think it's fundamentally important that we continue to provide security awareness training. It's necessary, right? But in addition to, there needs to be an addendum to that. We have put the cart before the horse. And ultimately, we want to shift from, by default, I trust what I see, to becoming an active detection layer. And in order to do that, we need to challenge people's belief systems. And in order to do that, we shift from basic security awareness, which is knowing in your head,
Right.
to what I call security appreciation, which really is caring, which comes from the heart. And that begins with making all security personal to the learner, to them, you know? When employees appreciate how security protects their own lives, that's when behavior changes permanently. And I call this the security appreciation gap. It's that chasm between an employee's intellectual understanding of risk, which again is awareness in their head, and the emotional commitment to act on that knowledge, which again is appreciation from the heart. Really, like if I say to you, I appreciate you, it means something and it matters on a very different level, you know? And ultimately, what you achieve with this is what we call the kitchen table effect. And that's the multiplier effect where successful training ends with the employee teaching the concepts to their family at home, cementing those lessons for life. And this is something I do. This is a methodology that I've been teaching now for 30 plus years. The strategic human firewall, the human blind spot. And really, like, while that methodology is mine, the concepts and the process and the procedures is not something that I can say you can't do. You can do all of this. Anybody can do all of this. You just have to do it. And once you do it, you start to see changes in people's behavior. Most CISOs, when they hire me, they bring me in because they're saying, listen, like our phishing simulation training, we've got good metrics. We're doing really good. But we still have like this percentage of people that we just want to make them care about security. How do you do that? And so what happens is I get in front of a live audience. And by the way, like I do this in front of 100 people and it's broadcast via Zoom to 4,000 people worldwide. I've done that so many times. And it doesn't take much to challenge people's belief systems and to get them to drink the Kool-Aid of what security appreciation actually is. And so I get in front of this live audience and I look out in front of at the audience every single time I'm introduced. This is so funny to me. And I'm looking out and I see 100 people with their arms folded, with a scowl on their face, checking their watch, looking at their phone. And they're looking at me like, okay, security guy, what are you going to tell me that I don't already know? And so I start asking them all these challenging questions: home security systems, password managers. How many of you are using the same passcode across multiple accounts versus how many of you are using a different passcode? And once they start to see like that their behavior and the way they engage in security and how they look at it as being a bad thing is like kind of ridiculous, they're like, huh, this presentation is not what I thought it was going to be. And now, like, they start thinking, I've got questions, because they've had questions their entire lives. They've literally their whole lives. And they start throwing their hands up. What happens is, like, as they are like with the scowl and the arms crossed, they begin to relax a little bit and the facial expressions begin to loosen up and their eyes begin to open up a little bit wider. And they lean in, they physically lean into the conversation, which is really funny to watch, for me at least. And as the arms go down, the hands go up because they have questions. CISO, they got questions. And you know what the questions are? How do I know what links are okay to click when I do a Google search? That's what they want to know. I mean, think about that, which is so unbelievably rudimentary. But that's where they're at. And so now, like, as I am answering questions and having this dialogue, which is what security awareness training should be, when it's security appreciation, it's dialogue, not a monologue being talked at and told what to do. It's dialogue, having a conversation like you would with your child who comes home, you know, who had a bad day, and you have a conversation with them. And as you have this dialogue, they loosen up and I start answering questions. And I say, oh, ma'am, you had a question too. Oh, he just asked the same question. Thank you. Because they all have the same questions. Yeah. And the CISO could answer all these questions so easily, but they never have, because it's not what they do. They just feed them security awareness training, which is not security appreciation training. And that's all scalable. It's all doable. It's all relatively easy. Every corporation has a hands-on event. These are perfect opportunities to actually like engage. And people love that. They want that dialogue. They're missing that dialogue. We've been hammering them over the head with security awareness training we're going on 15, 20 years. We're using a hammer. I use a scalpel. I kind of carve it out and I have a dialogue with them and they love it. They walk up to me at the end of the presentation and they're like, I got to tell you, I didn't want to be here today. I didn't think I needed this. All the time.
It's true.
It's the most fun. I didn't want to come here today. I was forced to be here. I didn't think I needed this, but I got to tell you, this was great. You know why? Because it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. It was very different. It was about me, which people love that. They want that. And this is about me and my issues. I really wish my spouse was here because he or she would have loved it, and
Right.
so on. And that's the kitchen table effect.
Amazing. Robert, I want to thank you for your time. How can people learn more about your work, your book, your speaking? Can you give us some info here?
Well, I'm on the Google like everybody else. Just search Robert Siciliano. I'm all over LinkedIn. I give it away every couple of weeks in my newsletter. I got tens of thousands of people that follow me. So Robert Siciliano on LinkedIn, or my website, of course, is protectnowllc.com. Protectnowllc.com.
Robert, thank you so much for being on our podcast. And then thank you all the listeners. I want to thank you. Please like and subscribe if you want to hear more. Looking forward to having you, Robert. Again, thank you for being on our show. Hopefully we'll get you back someday soon.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody have yourself a great day.